They looked like Holocaust survivors. That's what President Trump said with regards to the three Israeli hostages released over the weekend. What is behind this barbarity? Well, Messianic pro Israel activist Emanuel joins us now. So, Emily, what was your initial reaction when you saw the footage?
My grandfather is a Holocaust survivor, and I specifically remember his sister saying that he was unrecognizable when he got off the ship to America. And when I looked at these three men's faces, that is what I was thinking, that this is the faces of Holocaust survivors. And, when I went even read into it more, this is what the medical reports were saying, that their medical condition was no different to those who were released from concentration camps. So it was very hard to actually look at their faces.
Well, the question is, how could this happen in 2025? I know you have obviously a heart and a passion for Israel and the Jewish people. Where does this hatred in your mind come from? How could we get to this point again?
That's a really good question. And I remember last October visiting the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., and just having this very stark just point made in my head that this really stems from so much propaganda. That's where a lot of it actually comes from. And that is even in the people's hearts and minds in Gaza. So forget about even the West, but in Gaza, they all have a copy of Mein Kampf in their houses. This is what I just read recently. And so they've been just put so much propaganda has been put into the minds of these Gazan children, women, men, that the Jewish people are the enemies, that they are less than the human race. And I think this is exactly what the Nazis did to the German people, is that they made the Jewish people seem dehumanized. They dehumanized the Jewish people and made them seem less than the Germans. And this is what we're seeing right now. We're seeing that not just in Gaza, but we're seeing that all around the world, that
Hmm.
the Jewish people have been put, all the problems of the world have been put onto the Jewish people. So everything that's wrong with, you know, people who, everything that's wrong in the media, everything that's wrong in the banking system, it's just like, oh, well, it's the Jews, it's just the rich Jews. And that's even, we joke around sometimes about that, but that actually really all feeds into this anti-Semitic uh, propaganda that we take in.
Well, we've actually done a lot of videos recently, tragically, about the shocking rise in anti-Semitism in Australia, at Columbia University, all around the world. And I think you're, maybe one of the most unique people to speak on this, because you used to have pretty anti-Israel views and thoughts. And I know you even did, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but something like your college dissertation on something like a pro or an anti-Israel topic. So what changed for you? What were you able to see that kind of broke the wall?
Yeah, I just was like a regular college student that wanted to keep in with the trends of what everyone else was, uh, you know, going after. And so I wanted to get behind the cause of what everyone else was getting behind. And so that really affected me in my stance towards Israel, because not only were my peers pretty anti-Israel, but also my teachers. And so they would actually teach from a standpoint. Now looking back, I can see that Israel was the kind of bad person in the midst, and Palestinians was a victim. And so that just really rubbed off on me. And because I didn't actually know my facts and my history I thought I knew my history, but I didn't. I actually was just believing propaganda. And so when I actually ended up going to Israel for the first time, that is when I started to understand what the true history was and realized I had been completely lied to, or I just was blinded. I actually was also blinded. I didn't want to learn what the narrative of the other side was. I was just wanting to keep into that kind of box of this, you know, Israel is the oppressor and the Palestinians are the victims. And that was the cool thing to actually get behind. And so yeah, it was very eye opening when I actually went to Israel and spent a couple of months out there and realized. And I spent time with Palestinians. I spent time in the West Bank. I spent time with Israelis who were very Zionistic, and also Israelis who weren't. And I realized that this is a very different perspective, and that Palestinians are not the oppressed people, and that there's a lot of more deeper problems than what meets the eye. And
Mm,
we can, that's a whole nother conversation. But there is a whole history of how Israel came about. They didn't just come in and steal the land. There was a 100-year kind of history of Jewish people in the land, and also making Aliyah and coming to the land before Israel became a nation. And so I also came to faith in Jesus and read the Bible. And then I let the Bible also dictate my understanding of what Israel is and means today. So
mm.
that changed and shifted my perspective too.
I think what you're talking about is really really fascinating. I want to say one more thing about what President Trump said. He basically said, at some point, at quote, at some point we're going to lose our patience. So I think you probably see a speeding up of whatever is going to happen when it comes to this hostage deal soon with President Trump. But I think what you touched on is so interesting and so fascinating when it comes to understanding the situation from a biblical perspective. What colors your viewpoint? What do you when you see Israel now, when you see the Jewish people now, what do you see when you see it from a biblical perspective?
When I see the Jewish people now, I see that um, yeah, there's many different facets to that answer, but I see that God didn't create October 7th, but he is using October 7th to bring the Jewish people back to a understanding of God, because we're seeing an increase amount of Jewish people in the land not just turning to Jesus but turning back to God, and turning and having more of an interest in reading the Torah, the Talmud. They're just having an interest in God again, because unfortunately this is how in the Bible, and we see in the history of Israel, that God lifts his hands up off Israel and they then come back towards God. And I do believe that we're seeing that. But I also think that we're seeing many more Jewish people wanting to go back to Israel and return because of the level of anti-Semitism. And I think that is also very prophetic in the scriptures too, because we know that it says, I'm going to gather you from the north, east, south, and west and return you to your land, and you never again uproot you. That's what it says, is that it's a promise, it's a covenant, and it's not dependent on their obedience. It's dependent on God's faithfulness. So I do
Mm,
believe that we are seeing a return even more, especially from America, because I think American Jews, there's what, 8 million, I think, or 8 or 9 million Jewish people in America, and that is one of the places we haven't seen a huge amount of return to the land from. And I think that many American Jews now are thinking about going back to Israel.
mm,
And I was just there last June, and we did many different volunteering projects, and we got to talk to a lot of Israelis. And it's amazing because a couple of Israelis that we talked to had dreams and visions of Yeshua when we were there. And um, we went to army base to serve and volunteer there. And one of the girls we met was a Messianic Jew. She was a Jewish believer, and she'd never met anyone else who was a Jewish believer. She just kind of came to faith recently, and so we got to just encourage her and pray with her, and it's just amazing to see that. And it encourages me that in the midst of darkness, God is
mm,
really moving.
Wow, there's so many layers and so many facets to it. Emily, thank you for sharing your very unique perspective on this really tragic situation. We hope all the hostages come home soon and that we never have to make a video like this ever again. Emily, thank you so much.
Thank you.